Direct from Foxborough, Massachusetts, the gem of Norfolk County, and taped at the studios of Foxborough Cable Access. It's Foxborough Central. And here's your host, Bob Hickey.
And welcome to another episode of Foxborough Central. I am Bob Hickey, your host, thanking you for taking a little bit of time to join with me and my guests as we talk about the people, events, and organizations that make Foxborough truly the gem of Norfolk County. And for those of you who are fans of Foxborough, my guests need absolutely no introduction. My guest on my far left is Bill Stedman. Bill is the editor of the Foxborough Reporter. How do you do, Bill? Thank you. And
nice to have you here.
And my other guest is our esteemed town historian and former editor, always editor in my heart, Jack Othellette of the Foxborough Reporter.
Yes,
how are you doing, Jack?
Very good, and you?
Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Always.
So you didn't push him out or anything.
No,
Okay. So we're
no way.
Okay. So we're
I
going
was
good.
glad to drag him in. Help drag him in.
Well, perhaps you have been wondering why I would have Jack and Bill here, and the reason is very simple. Foxborough Reporter is a local institution. It has been with us since 1884, and it has been bringing the local news, including columnists of varied skill sets, to your doorstep. And I thought it'd be a great opportunity to sit and talk with two people who are essentially community leaders here in Foxborough, who are heart and soul of the Foxborough Reporters. So thank you both for taking the time, first of all, to join me and to have this, let's call it a roundtable discussion about the history of the Foxborough Reporter. But and Jack, being the town historian, you're always the go-to person on everything, but I know journalism is your lifeblood, and this is hopefully going to be right up your alley.
Well, absolutely. I came to journalism more by accident, by design, but I realize, as Bill does for his years in his native Walpole, the importance and the benefit of having a community newspaper. I mean, I have just seen this so many times when people in a town without a community newspaper. It is often so hard to get a charitable effort going, or doing this or doing that. And of course, this is the days before the electronic multimedia. But Foxborough has been privileged to have a community paper for just forever.
You know, and you mentioned that, and I would also further that by saying that communities that lose their local paper are a lesser community because you lose that voice, you lose that local voice, you become more of the homogenized part of everybody else. And okay, we're now a regional paper. We've got there's one paper I was just looking at that covers 8 different communities, and how difficult is it to get your voice heard, your imprint, your flavor, if you're mixed amongst everybody else. Right. And so I suppose, you know, and with Bill being the current editor, with your history, now how long have you been with the Foxborough Reporter?
See, I can't even remember. I came here when Patriot Place was approved, pretty much. Patriot Place in the dog park I started with. And
of course, he had years at the Walpole Times.
Sure.
Yeah, not the Walpole Times, but I was at the Sun Chronicle. Prior to that, I was with the Town Crier newspapers in Wayland, Weston, and Sudbury back in the 80s. And my biggest frustration there was that we'd lose all the local contests to some guy named Jack Othellette at the Foxborough Reporter.
Well, Jack Othellette and the Foxborough Reporter, clearly award-winning and leaders in the New England news. And you're going to have to help me out with this. The New England News Group.
Newspaper Association.
Thank you.
And now it's a mix of the Publishers Association as well, but still continuing the same ideals and the same strengthening, if you will, of the newspaper market. In fact, they're coming up now again on their annual newspaper contest, and chance to bring everybody in for 3 days of serious workshops and growth opportunities, and the value of networking. And I went to one of their events last year, and not only did I meet a lot of people who worked for me at one time, but others all over New England where I did workshops and, oh, do you remember this, remember that? And of course, it's just all the memories flooding back, and it's a great community.
Yeah, it sounds though, and you're still very active then, obviously. Retirement has not caused moss to grow on the wheels of your car.
I had to pull back on the Press Association involvement and things like that, and also I was the Massachusetts Sunshine Chairman for the Society of Professional Journalists for 18 years, the contact person on open meeting violations and rules and regulations. But locally, just Foxborough was so blessed because not only originally we get coverage in the county papers out of Dedham or Norfolk County papers. Eventually, 1849, we got our own in the Salmagundi Journal. But
well, you say 1849, so that predates the Foxborough Reporter. So perhaps now is a good time to just jump right in. And the Foxborough Reporter wasn't always here. Starting in 1884, what was here before that?
We had the Salmagundi Journal, which was primarily local merchants promoting the goods they had for sale, but they'd mix a little information in with it. That was followed by the Home Library. A man by the name of William Thomas published it, and it was a very respectable local newspaper. But interestingly, he then quickly switched off and started the Eagle and Flag. And if you can imagine what kind of a masthead you have for paper, Eagle and Flag. But he took 2 students out of the English and Classical High School to edit the paper. Now, I mean, this was unheard of. Thomas Grover and Edwin Bacon. Now, Thomas Grover went on to be the first night editor of the Boston Globe, worked for the Boston Advertiser and the Boston Post. So, obviously, this was not an ordinary kid.
It was his calling, yes.
But his co-editor was Edwin Bacon. Now, Bacon stayed on locally. He edited the Norfolk County Chronicle, which took the place of the Eagle and Flag. And he had somebody working with him by the name of Edwin Clark as co-editor. Edwin Clark followed in with the Foxborough Times. He was editor. And that was finally phased out. Nobody had the longevity. I mean, published 20 issues, 30 issues.
Right.
That was it.
Well, back then newspapers were, and you mentioned that it was the merchants getting together, but wasn't that the intent of, obviously with people who had strong political beliefs, they would put out papers, but wasn't a newspaper also, just as it is now, a business? And part of it was to promote the local business, and the businesses would get together and create this, and to get them to look at the advertisements, they would create content. Right. And so with that, is it so odd that these didn't last long, and isn't it more that the Foxborough Reporter was odd in its longevity?
Yes, but most of these papers now, the local printer was involved. So he's also doing all the letterheads and business cards and flyers for all the local businesses.
Okay.
So he was the logical mix for the advertising to carry to the customers.
Okay.
But they started the Foxborough Times with this young Edwin Clark as editor. And he stayed on for the founding of the Foxborough Courier, a new publisher, A.J. Nichols. Clark was the editor. They morphed into the Foxborough Reporter.
Okay.
So Nichols was the original publisher. Clark was the original editor. And again, the local tie with the print shop, which, interestingly enough, assured an even greater future for the Foxborough Reporter. Longevity was the biggest problem of any newspaper.
Sure.
No matter how good you were. The Foxborough Company had come to town, gained some traction, was doing very, very well in the production of instruments for process and control. They had a lot of printing needs.
Yes.
Brochures, flyers, stationery, whatever. They had a business that was growing worldwide. they were paying a lot of money out to other people for printing. It occurred to them to perhaps purchase one of the local print shops. So they purchased the print shop of Mr. Nichols, which happened to be publishing the Reporter. They also then bought the print shop of Mr. Watrous and operated them separately as a print shop. They were still printing the Foxborough Reporter.
Okay.
Now, the economics of it, why separate businesses? Let's move them in as part of the Foxborough Company.
One would think.
They had their own printing plant, but they had a little oddity there. One of them was publishing a weekly newspaper. So they had to change their articles of incorporation to manufacturing instruments and publishing a weekly newspaper.
Really?
But that brought the stability that favored the Reporter over any other hint of ever publishing anything.
You know, and so many avenues to go down with this, and of course I'm here with my guest Bill Stedman, who's the current editor of the Foxborough Reporter, Jack Othlet, our town historian here in Foxborough, and past editor, should we call him editor emeritus of the Foxborough Reporter?
Always editor.
And we're talking about the history of the Foxborough Reporter, our local gateway to truth and information. The interesting thing, and it didn't occur to me just now, that the Foxborough Reporter predates the Foxborough Company by several decades. And so the Reporter had to have stood alone as a worthwhile,
Absolutely.
commercially successful, and informationally relevant newspaper prior to the Foxborough Company coming to town.
Right from the start, it was destined for greater acceptance and longevity. I mean, it was a quality newspaper. Back in those days, it was such a laborious process to print a newspaper. Hand-set type. Every letter of every word had to be brought out of the type case and made up into a form.
Right.
Every illustration originally had to be carved in wood, later made in metal, to make up that page. Now, it took so long to do that, that early on, the front page was nothing but filler things. News releases from around the world, oddities here and curiosities there,
Okay.
and whatever, just to get your name out, and there was never a breaking story on the front page. So that fell to the other pages. But then they had their pages all set up for your news, your social, your churches, on down through. And it gave the reader a comfortable feeling somewhere between the 6th and 7th rib that you knew where you were going to find everything every week. And it was a growth mechanism for the community. And you would see articles many, many weeks in advance about when the cranberry harvest was going to be ready.
Okay.
So that all of the people could plan their time. Some of the stores even had Christmas things out early because that's when people would have more available cash to buy presents when the cranberries were ripe.
Right.
Things like that.
Back when we were an agrarian economy here.
Right. And they would always say how many thousands of bushels had been harvested and all of that. And it was a close-knit community. The newspaper was critical to that existence.
To the fabric of it. And I'll say this as an aside, one of our volunteers, Betty Travers, who is our longtime camera operator here at Foxborough Central, she had gone back through her archives and pulled out this gem from 1984, which was celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Foxborough Reporter. And if anybody ever has a chance to go to the library or to look in your own attic and find this or one of the subsequent ones, I believe you did the 125th anniversary one.
Oh, that was easy. I did the 100th, and I promised, I made it very clear when I did this that I would not do the 200th.
Well, I think you might still be on the hook if you're
But
so you're not still doing offset press on the Gutenberg?
We are not. Everything is computerized.
Everything is computerized.
Much different even from when I started, when we used to have to type it on a piece of paper and send it down to the print shop, and then they would retype it into the letter set machine.
And everything is digital now,
But
even
it's
the,
now
even the
digital.
cameras.
Everything's on the computer, photos, everything, layout. I do it all.
Because I do remember one of my early ventures into the offices of the Foxborough Reporter. This was when I came in peace on that one. I don't always go in peace at the Foxborough Reporter, but this one I came in peace. And we're looking for pictures. And there's just a treasure trove of stuff in that. I believe it was for Andy Galla's anniversary of working in town, our former town manager, and I was helping to coordinate he was being recognized by the Boy Scouts. And you pulled out so many treasures, pictures, good articles, and so there's a lot of archives. You are such a resource, Jack, with having this up here and being able to give it. How did we end up going from a company paper to where we're at now? And I say company paper in the sense that the Foxborough Reporter changed their articles of incorporation to include publishing and Foxborough Company. And then with it being published in-house, when did we stop publishing in-house? And when did we come, because currently we're owned by the same parent company that owns the Sun Chronicle, and that is the name of?
United Communications Corporation out
Thank
of
you very
Kenosha,
much.
Wisconsin.
I am a
family-owned company.
Yes, I'm a columnist, I should know that.
Yes.
When with changes within the Foxborough Company, financial setbacks, reorganizations, many things. When Art Brennan was editor of the Reporter, he really had hoped to break it away and have it be independent. I will say, when I was offered the position of editor of the Foxborough Reporter, I refused the contract. I said I will be here as long as we are a true community newspaper. In other words, we're not a company newspaper. We're a community newspaper. And we had that understanding, and there was never that interference. I use the word advisedly. There was no company mandate as to what the paper would do or should do or say to do. But the time came that it was going to be sold. And the bidding process, a lot of interest. Worcester County newspapers won the bid. Now, I knew the publisher. I respected him very highly. We worked on a lot of projects together, like diversity in the class newsroom, different ethics seminars and things like that.
Okay.
But I knew that he was purchasing the Foxborough Reporter only to protect his rear flank of his newspaper company. I did not want to be a barrier.
Gotcha.
So Vin and I went back to management and asked them to reconsider. And our recommendation was the Sun Chronicle. 2 reasons. Number one, if they didn't get the bid, they were coming to town with an office anyway. But number two, I had such respect for their parent organization. And the editor of the publisher of the Sun Chronicle at that time was, again, highly respected and a rock-solid journalist. So we could, with confidence, recommend the sale to the parent company, knowing that the integrity of the reporter would be preserved, the commitment to the community would be the same. Where I had managed the reporter for years, not only as editor, but managing editor,
Right.
so I handled the business end of it as well. In all honesty, at that stage of my life, I was not ready to go work for somebody else.
Right.
So I stayed on at the time of the sale through the first quarter to make sure that everybody from the Foxborough Reporter transferred over at exactly the same amount of money with the same seniority, same benefits. Everybody was protected. And then I could move on, and I went to become Director of Publications for the New England Press Association. But the integrity of the Foxborough Reporter was preserved all through the Foxborough Company ownership. The Foxborough Company had so many times in its history bailed out other local businesses, had no relation to them. Montague Oil Company, troubled times, money coming in from the Bristols. McDonald Farm Dairy, when they changed from horse and wagon delivery to trucks, why would I find a fleet of their trucks in the photo library of the Foxborough Company? Because the Bristols financed the trucks for the McDonald's. Those types of things. So to have a benevolent posture toward the local newspaper, that was part of who they were.
Well, and I think that is what a lot of us have lost over the years, is an understanding of what the Foxborough Company truly meant to the town and the community. Today, yes, but we now view it more because of the transition and Wall Street and shareholders, and times change, and the current owner, Schneider Electric, seem to have a great commitment to Foxborough and to our growth. But it's so much different, and this is going to directly tie back to having a local press, to having people who actually live and know you. You knew the Bristol brothers, and you knew the people that managed, because they were us, and the people who lived here. And Baker Street being a historic district had the homes and the owners and the people who lived, would work and play and shop and consume and read and write. And with the local flavor of the Foxborough Reporter being key, people knew about what was going on, and you would lose that if we didn't have that. So many things popped up in that talk you just gave. Vin Igo, of course, as the Vin you're referring to as Vin Igo, who was the heart and soul of all things photography and reporting and going along with. And of course, his daughter Christina is still on your staff, carrying forth the torch.
Great job.
Doing a great job.
Yeah,
Couldn't
see?
do it without her.
Okay. Well,
Every once in a while, I call her up and say, "Boy, your father's smiling on that one."
Exactly.
and so it also goes to show the continuity, but great note about ensuring that everybody had a place, and ensuring that the local ownership would be respected, and even if it wasn't owned physically, it would be owned in spirit at a local, with an office and with control and independence. It's something you said at the very beginning, and it's true today. Always know your source, and just because you read it on the internet, know where it's coming from and who actually paid for whatever study and whoever is funding the statement, because nothing is ever always as it seems, and that's why having an independent voice and having a local voice is so key. Which brings us all the way back to, where are we at today?
Well, number one,
Or I shouldn't even say today. Let's talk about longevity. Who took over for you when you gave up the reins?
all right. Number one,
Going back to where we were.
I was very, very sensitive about somebody stepping in for me. Anybody that's been there so long, I actually felt sorry for the replacement, because all they're going to hear is, well, Jack wouldn't have done it that way, or all this. But
Hear
I
that.
think we still hear that.
Mitch,
Exactly.
Mitch McDonald stepped in, but then Mitch had bigger goals. He went on to be managing editor of a magazine group. He had a great career. And there was a couple of temporary things, and one day, and I can remember it well, in the kitchen of our home down on South Street before we moved back uptown, I had Jeff Peterson down there. He was working for the Dedham paper, and we had a long conversation about the joy and the opportunity of editing a paper in your hometown. Now, interesting, I think Jeff was a 5th grader when they had the shadow program about jobs. And Jeff spent a day with me
Really?
back then.
Recruiting at an early age.
And he had the desire, and he was proving he was doing a great job on the daily paper. Much to my relief, Jeff agreed to apply for the job.
And Jeff Peterson at the time was selectman in Foxborough, so he had to give up that role to take on this role. And this was
well, there's been some mixes of public service and newspaper service over the years. But also in selecting United Communications, granted, they had to come out here and approve us, but it didn't occur to me as much that we were also on trial. We were being reviewed. And I learned after that the clincher in deciding to go full tilt and secure the Foxborough Reporter, because in the course of conversation, I referred to my wife of 40 some odd years then as my bride. And he told me years later that was his deciding moment, that this would be the editor in the paper that he had.
Howard Brown?
Howard Brown.
Wow.
I love that
Rest in
man.
peace.
And his greatest joy in life was to say something in the fewest number of words. Now, you might do something absolutely fabulous in the paper, and you would get a letter with about 8 of the most carefully chosen words you have, and it was perfect. You got right to the heart of it. But that was a game. So, of course, I would try to imitate him and never did as well. But it was, when I wrote back to him, it was also pretty.
Well, that's fantastic. We are so out of time, I cannot even begin to tell you. For everybody at home, I'm, of course, with Bill Stebbins, current editor, and Jack Othellette, editor emeritus of the Foxborough Reporter, and we're taking a stroll down what the Foxborough Reporter was and where it has come to where we're at now. So now we are still a weekly publication. Has it always been a weekly publication?
Yes.
Always been a weekly publication. From 1884 to today in 2014, you can do the math, about 130 years, that's a long time. And credit to everybody who's still making this go strong. You at home should do your part and buy an issue of the Fox Reporter. You can always check them out at foxboroughreporter.com and learn all about how to get hold of it. But it's at all the stores here in town, and they also will send it out for those expats who have moseyed beyond our hallowed borders, who still want to keep touch on local news. And so that's, I guess, where I started this and where we'll end it, local. How important is it to keep it local?
It's very important, and I'm very lucky to have people like Jack, Jeff, Christine, Evie Mom. I could name a zillion people who live here and know this town and are local and contribute, and it's not a bunch of outsiders. And you.
Oh.
No, but too, it's critical in the changes that came mid 1980s, changes in the tax laws. If you were ever going to sell your family newspaper, that was the time to do it, because you weren't going to be able to get the transition you wanted. That's when so many papers went on the market. These newspaper groups were formed.
Gotcha.
It was a tough time. You then had the emergence of the electronic media. Now, the first ones to leave us were help wanted. The next ones were real estate.
Sure.
So many people. The local community newspaper is a partner in the community, not only for the people and their social and economic fate, but the news that they need to know to be good citizens, be informed citizens. But it's the same for the business community to keep this alive, to complete the cycle. The newspapers today, nobody can take their franchise away. There's not an institution on earth that could do hometown America better than the local newspaper.
Exactly.
And some have tried. And,
so we
and
need
they've
to
not done a
encourage
good job
that,
of it.
because as they whittle away at the ability of the local newspaper to fully hold up a mirror to the entire community, that community has lost something. And the citizens are not as informed as they might have been or need to be. And it is really a community effort to encourage, number one, readership, encourage, number two, local advertising. to give the paper the number of pages it needs, the number of staff members it needs to fully represent. And the greatest asset this town can have is an informed electorate.
And to have that, of course, cable access does its part, but we really can't.
Absolutely.
But we really can't replace the importance of the newspaper, because with internet content, with what we do here, a lot of it is gained from what's in the paper. I know that as a columnist, I'm completely dependent upon what I'm reading in the paper to identify what the local hot topics are, what is going on, and what direction we're going in. But if I'm just one voice, and there's presumably 17,000 others out there in our community, and then however more that are connected to Foxborough, and it seems like whenever you go out of town, you always have somebody who's connected in some way to Foxborough. The importance of having that local paper it cannot be overstated. The internet doesn't do what a newspaper does, and no matter what anybody says, it just can't replace the paper. And you talk about advertising, going back to the very beginning of the Foxborough American Eagle.
Oh, the Eagle and Flag.
The Eagle and Flag, and its predecessors before that, where it was put together by the merchants. Again, a paper is a business, and a paper runs off of advertising and off of readership. And we have to do our part by reading, but also the advertisers need to understand or have an expectation that people who read the paper are going to read their advertisements.
Right, but let us not, for one moment, diminish the role of cable. I always promoted the newspaper as the scrapbook fillers of Foxborough. Cable is the video cabinet fillers of Foxborough to see this come to life. And Foxborough Cable Access, in my humble opinion, has done a fabulous job. It is, I think, a credit to the community and to the volunteers that make it work. So, but again, this is all part of the package, if you will, to keep the community engaged. The greatest joy is to give somebody their 30 minutes, 30 seconds in the limelight, you will, to make sure that no good deed goes unrecognized, no need goes unreported. I always believed in Foxborough, if you show somebody a need and how it can be filled, step back out of the way. People are going to come and do it.
And then you get to the whole, and I use this term shamelessly. I think I just used it at the beginning. The fabric of our community. That's one of your lines that I picked up on back when I first moved to Foxborough in 1993. And with that, cable, newspaper, the civic organizations, town leaders stepping up, and the business community stepping up. That's what forms a community, and so this is one of the key legs on any table that's making us what we are.
But all of this is part of that sense of community that first caused families, parts of 5 different towns. And let me correct myself, of 4 different towns.
4 different towns?
To come forward and say, let's become a community of our own. And oh my goodness, how much easier that would have been if we had a Foxborough reporter. But
well, we didn't then, and we do now. And everybody out there in Foxborough should be doing your part. Buy your reporter. It's only $1. It's a good deal. You get more information you can shake a stick at.
Exactly.
Bill Stebbin, my guest.
Thank you
so much.
Bob.
And Jack Outlet, I'm going to give you the absolute last word right now because you have earned it.
well, and I thank you too, Bill, because it's just such a comfort to have somebody come in, step in, and just go forward like we never missed a beat.
I've got a great model to follow, so it's easy.
And now that we don't compete in the contests anymore.
Yes, exactly. Thank goodness.
But I have such great respect for the sense of community that has made us who we are. And this is one of the components, if you will, one of the building blocks of that sense of community, to keep everybody aware of what's going on in their community. Who's hurting, who's celebrating, who's passing away, who's doing what. We have to know.
And watching our kids grow through the sports pages. Mr. Carty does a great job in there also.
Absolutely. And I would just hope and pray that every one of those students gets their due recognition. And thank goodness we have a school system where every student can find themselves somewhere. Academics, music, athletics, whatever it is. They can find themselves.
And thank goodness we have a local paper to document that every step along the way. On behalf of all the volunteers here at Foxborough Cable Access, I'm reminding you that you can always check us out at our website, fcatv.org. My guests today have been Bill Stedman and Jack Othelette with the Foxborough Reporter. You can check them out at foxboroughreporter.com or stop by the offices on Mechanic Street here in beautiful downtown Foxborough. I'm Bob Hickey, your host. We are so out of time, I can't even believe it. I think we've already moved into tomorrow. Until next time, friends, have a great day, Foxborough.